Avatar Meher Baba says, the greatest need of humanity today is love, love divine, which is pure and selfless, which awakens man to the proper sense and understanding of his real duty in life, which is to find true happiness in giving, not in receiving, in serving and not in being served, and in willfully participating in the sufferings of others more than in their happiness. My mission in life is to kindle that divine spark of love in all. November 23rd, 1941, from a letter to GSN Murthy.
We're going to look at three different perspectives of how the West had contributed to Baba's work. One, I'm just going to list them first, and then we'll talk about them more deeply, is the basic difference between the East and the West, and how that plays into our topic. The other two are maybe a little more exotic. The second one is divinization of matter in the West. And that has to do with how matter was prepared for silence to descend. Because, Baba could not have brought down the silence before. He was able to do it now because matter is now ready to receive it. And that is primarily due to the contributions of the West. And the third one is Baba's mandate to discard rituals. Now you might think, what does ritual have to do with any of this? So we'll talk about that. So now we're going to first speak about the difference between the East and the West. The old approach to God was to divide everything into dualities and into distinct opposites. And so we have the mundane material world represented by the West, and we have the spiritual world represented by the East. We say the East is spiritual, is the land of the heart, and the West is this no good materialistic world all about the head. And that is how creation has been working. So this worked very nicely, very well, as long as we were primarily in the winding phase of life, when most of humanity was engaged in winding. That was very helpful, because as you know, to wind anything, one has to isolate opposites and become very focused on one of the opposites, and then go and do the other one, so that each part of the opposite is learned fully. And so in Life at its Best, I came across an interesting quote from Baba that I thought I'd share with you. Baba says, during its various lives as a human being, the ego mind can oscillate endlessly between the opposites, like indulgence and repression, secularism and religion, superiority complex and inferiority complex, self-aggrandizement and self-humiliation, introversion and extroversion, virtue and vice, pain and pleasure, I and you, mine and thine, So, and then he continues. He does this without arriving at a true poise, at a true equilibrium, which is attainable only through the right understanding of the truth. The oscillation of the ego mind through the opposites is reactionary. Therefore, though it passes through extremes, it cannot arrive at true poise. So we've learned through the opposites that Baba is talking about here during our winding phase. But as he said, that is not the understanding of truth. For that to happen, we need to unwind them, which means bring the opposites together and blend them, meld them, unify them. So during the winding phase, we shun the material world through eons of time of winding, and we have conditioned our minds to think that materiality has nothing to do with spirituality. That's the common understanding of most of us, or was before we learned about Baba. And to incarnate during winding phases and to learn about spirituality, we incarnated in the East, the land of spirituality. And if you wanted to learn about the West, we incarnated in the West. However, all that exists in creation, be it spiritual or be it worldly, is a materialized version of God. All of it is a materialized version of God, spirituality and materiality. And no part of it can be ignored. And all of it is something that we have to experience. Perfection, worthy of the name, requires that we join every iota of existence. By join mean we have to experience every iota of experience of existence. So we must live in every part of the world, experience and learn the special qualities that each part of the earth provides. And we already know that East and West provide for different kinds of learning because they circulate different types of energy. Now, what I'm going to be sharing with you is, again, based on what I've learned of Baba and of my teachers, but most of the material is from what was prepared for Baba's, for the 50th anniversary of Baba's East-West gathering in India, and which was presented in that program. And so I'm just touching the surface of that material a little bit. The divine energies circulating through Earth follow different patterns and blends according to divine design. This gives each geographic region its particular character and pattern of life, from the color of a flower to the culture of each region. And because of this, as we live in different parts of the world, our consciousness is inclined in different ways. Now, geologists tell us that there have been times when there has been a single supercontinent, and that it slowly has broken up and then come back together and broken up. And the last supercontinent was called Pangea, which began to break apart about 175 years ago. It created the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and this way Europe and Africa and Asia and America all drifted apart. And the currents of Earth began to flow through them, but differently based on the characteristics of each continent, each piece of land. This divergence allowed different cultures, religions, ethical and national values unique to each hemisphere to emerge. So each hemisphere had its own qualities and characteristics. And this allowed immense developments of the lower mind or the rational mind in the West, and the spiritual qualities that are associated with the East in the East. So the West is associated with the head, with the lower mind, with the rational mind, with the intellect. And one of the functions of the lower mind is to serve humanity in its survival through mastery over matter. And the West has reached its zenith. It's like a ball that has been rolling and has finally come up to speed. And now it's continued to go and gather more territory. But Baba talks about how, and I'll read the quotation, how East and West are now at the zenith of what they were built to contribute. And so, because of the contributions of the West through the intellect and the mind, they have mastered materiality, and they have made, technologies and all kinds of things that make life so we don't have to spend all of our life, hunting or gathering or cultivating, and we have now time to spend on other things. And so it has freed man so that it can move towards other things. Now man is distracted by things that are not maybe all that relevant, but eventually that freedom is there for them to focus on what is real. At the same time, the lower mind has helped develop the ego. And the ego is indispensable for the winding phase, because it is the ego which provides that lens to focus on specific, narrow, limited things that it is to learn, that the consciousness has to become acquainted with and imprint in its fibers as sanskaric fibers, as impressions. And the ego provides that structure, and that has been the kind of most developed in the West. During this period, divinity had a different plan for evolution of consciousness in the East. The Eastern Hemisphere was focused on spiritual learning and internal relationship with God. In the East, consciousness moved inward and upward with a focus on God and eternal values rather than human values. So in the East, consciousness moved inward and upward, while in the West, the direction of consciousness was outside, the outside world. So that's why we see that in the past, all the previous avatars that we know of, starting from Zoroaster, Krishna, Ram, Muhammad, Meher Baba, all were born in the East. And also, most of the spiritual figures and perfect masters manifested in the East. In contrast, Baba identified only 4 authentic saints in the West and only 1 perfect master, Saint Francis, in the West. However, by the 20th century, the East and the West had each reached a level of completeness and the zenith of their destined purpose. So Baba could now use these perfected tasks to do something with. So just to kind of put all of this in the context of winding and unwinding, up to now, we have had the East and the West, which each had its own lens and provided for the winding of that particular type of knowing. And so we could learn about spirituality and about materiality separately. But during the unwinding, which is what Baba has ushered in through his new creation, which is going to become the most prevalent rather than winding, the opposites come together. So the East and the West had to come together. And Baba, and you know that story about how even during the MEHER days, Baba sent Rustam to the West to bring students, and Rustam met with one of Baba's agents who said, in the past, the East has had its own masters and the West has had its own masters, but your master has come to bring the East and the West together. And so that is what Meher Baba is ushering in, and he began working on it early on. So in Meher Baba's new creation, the primary focus will be the unwinding process, when the opposites come together. And so this required setting the foundations for unifying the hemispheres into a single global sphere, no longer heavy. And in 1932, Baba said the following. He said, "It will be one of my greatest miracles to bring together and blend the realistic West with the idealistic East, and the West at the zenith of its material and intellectual attainment, and the East at the height of its spiritual manifestation in the shape of the avatar, will meet without shaming or looking down upon each other. They will both be like equals. We won't shun the West as being materialistic and no good if we are after the new spirituality that Baba is bringing." So the melding together is a necessary preparation for the birth of a new consciousness, which is neither material nor spiritual, nor an additive blend of each. Is something totally new. It is a brand new consciousness never seen on earth before, a consciousness centered on experience of the unity of all creation in God and as God. And that has been the central message that Baba has brought, and he has done everything that needed to be done mechanically and spiritually to bring that about. And as you remember, Baba's accomplishments during the new life was based on what he said, blending the God state, the focus of the East, with the man state, the focus of the West. He said, the consuming of freedom and binding, which is characteristic of the fiery free life, means that there is a complete blending of God's state and man's state, so that the one does not live through opposition to the other. And there can be no question of the one encroaching upon the province of the other. So the West has been essential and critical in maturing humanity's man state, his material aspect, or his head, for the blending that is to happen with the heart, represented by the East. Baba says in sweet, short sentence, I shall bring a happy blending of the head and heart. Without the head, there would be no blending. So that is one of the contributions of the West, to bring that head into the mix. Now, the second one has to do with divinization of matter in the West. This might be a little less familiar to you, more dust on it. You already know it again, but need to shake the dust off, blow the dust off. So Baba is bringing silence down to divinize creation and boost creation's ability to move towards the source in new ways, in ways that were not possible in the past. So he's bringing the silence down. Now, another contribution of the West has been to prepare the material world for this silence to be able to come down and get anchored. Before now, Baba could not bring the silence down in this way because material substance of the physical world rejected it, it repelled it. It was dissonant with the divine vibrations. So the vibrations of the material substance of the earth had to change, had to be refined, had to be uplifted so that silence, so that it could accept silence, it could resonate with silence, and it could anchor silence. And of course, this path was accomplished by the West, which boosted the radiance of matter so that it no longer resisted the descent of silence. So let me give you an example to make it concrete. When we excavate and extract ore out of the earth, out of stone, out of rocks, out of the material world, and then make out of that ore something useful for creation, for humanity, for animals. We are aiding that matter, lifting its vibrations, giving it qualities of radiance that humans only have. And we didn't have it when we were rocks. But now as humans, we have this new level of radiance, this new consciousness that is able to even become one with God. And so when we handle anything, we impart to it that consciousness. If we eat an apple, if we eat chicken or fish or whatever, we are helping that domain. We are helping potato-dom, fish-dom, chicken-dom, because we are not separate from any of it. Sanskaras, as we talked about last time, connect us to the entire creation. And not only that, we are a microcosm of the world. We have everything in us. We have minerals, we have gas, we have vegetables. You know, the biologists have this term that I think I have mentioned before. They say ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Ontogeny is embryonic development. Phylogeny is the development of different phyla of animals and vegetables and so forth, families of animals and vegetables and so forth. So if we look at the embryonic state of a human as it grows, it goes through periods that it has gills, times that it looks like a fish, looks like a, different kinds of animals that during evolution, a human has been. And all of those forms not only are with us during the embryonic development that we can see, but are imprinted in our sanskaras, in our sanskaric fibers. And so when we consume or interact in some positive way with things of the world, we aid those things of the world. Now, the West has been especially focused on the material world, as we said. And so it has done more in the past 300, 400 years to elevate the matter of the world than the East or anywhere else. Although East is now catching up and is doing the same kinds of things that the West used to do. And so, but the West was key in preparing matter so that when Baba came and wanted to bring down his silence, that matter would not reject it like the past and would be resonant with it and would allow the silence to flow down more fully. So there might be questions about this, but let's wait till the end. And if you have questions, we can talk about it later. So that's the second contribution of the West, to prepare the matter for the descent of silence. Now we get to the topic of rituals. Well, rituals are very ancient and have been with us for eons and eons and eons. And so it's difficult for us to not be affected by them when we see something ritualistic being performed. We may break into tears, we may, any kind of emotional reaction may come out of us. Now, in the past, the reason we are that way is that in the past, rituals were an integral part of religion. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but what used to be the case, spiritual force was not as available as it is now, which Baba has brought. It had to be forced down. And to be forced down, there were true spiritual figures, elevated spiritual figures who trained their disciples in very specific and rigid ways of fasting and austerities and seclusions and so forth, which had a ritual around it to bring down the needed divine energy. And so that was the way that divine force was circulated and brought down and used by the masters through those kinds of trainings and through those rituals. And, and they were very helpful. And they were essential because at that time, silence could not be anchored. Matter was not ready for it, and humanity was not ready for it. So rituals pulled down the energy and locked them in bounded ways, which is something that, as we said, happens during winding. And winding was the primary way of being before now. Another name for ritual is magic. Magic is essentially the same thing. You say certain words, you do certain movements with your arms and hands and whatnot, and then you pull down and you lock down energy in a certain specific way. And of course, all of this gave rise to superstitions, and which were kind of part and parcel of religious belief and the magic and all of that was used at the time. And this was, of course, for the masses. There were always true spiritual figures, though very few. And that is what is changing, that the majority are going to become spiritual, truly spiritual. And Baba talks about this a little bit in the Wayfarers. He talks about different paths of approaching God, and he talks about a number of them, and I'm going to mention two of them. One he calls God absorbed, and another one he calls God commune. The God communed are the ones that have to force this energy to come down. And he says these are the yogis. If you want to read that passage in the Wayfarers, he talks about how the yogis, the Raja yogis and the Jnana yogis, they're the ones who kind of pull down it. But then he says something very interesting. He says, the God communed man, if he stays on that path, as he generally does, never advances beyond the sixth plane. So Baba is very clear that no matter how hard they may try, they cannot reach the goal. So that was what kind of the yogis did, and the East, that was the cradle of religion, and most people were religious and so forth. That was the East. In the West, on the other hand, starting, 300, 400, 500 years ago, there was suddenly a burst of rationality and a focus on reason and lower mind, on tangible material aspects of experience. And it rebelled against all of that ritual and all of that magic and all of that superstition. And they completely threw it out, and they said, there's nothing to it. And only thing that's real is what you can touch, what you can see, what you can, what is physical right in front of you. Now, unwinding cannot happen with either of them alone. can't have rituals that bring down and lock knowing in bounded ways. And it won't do for the Western approach of totally disregarding anything spiritual. Nevertheless, because the West is rejecting that old approach, it is preparing the way for humanity, for the new culture, for the Baba's new creation, to be able to use the silence that has been brought down in unritualistic ways. And as you all know, how Baba kind of rejected the approach of rituals. And in fact, at the end of his Mananash, you know that scene where he had this piece of paper where Erich had written, "Hereby I destroy all, I burn in the flame all the rites and rituals." And so Baba destroyed that old approach of rituals. And now we don't need to do that anymore because Baba has brought down the silence, and we now live a normal life, a balanced life, that the test of spirituality is in the mundane world. Oh, the hardest lessons of spirituality are to put one's learning, one's accumulated learning, one's blended learning that has been the result of unifying the opposites into action, into living, into expression, in demonstrating it.
This was a fabulous talk. Thank you so much. So, I had several things. One is this whole concept of anchoring energy was one that I was trying to understand. And you had said in the past, in the winding phase, rituals did this. And now, because the West has prepared the way, the silence can be held because whatever the West has done has anchored it. My understanding from what you said is it's because we've worked with matter and touched matter and brought human consciousness to different forms of matter, that's why it can be anchored. And then the other part of this that you hinted at, I got the impression that this was all about energy and vibrations, and that the silence had to be able to resonate with the energies that were being transformed, and that whatever the materialistic part was, the vibrations had to be raised such that it allowed for the descent, I guess, some void or something to open up so it could come in. So please, I mean, these are a lot of ideas. Please tell me what's not right about it, and did I understand any of it?
You're right on. It's just, you know, think that you want to dissolve salt in oil. It doesn't work. But if you put some chemicals in the in oil that allows it to be emulsified, like soap or something, then it is prepared and salt can come and be absorbed by the oil, which is now changed. It is exactly the same thing. You see, to our eyes, this matter looks the same as it did when we were born. But even in this short period of 60 years or whatever, it has changed dramatically, because see how much science has progressed, how much ore has been excavated, used, and all of that. And so it is just in the past several hundred years that kind of the fulcrum shifted. You know how it is that the hay that broke the camel's back. And so now we are at a time when everything is accelerated in preparing and you know, just the fact that now we know our interactions with matter can help matter, we help it even more by just knowing that, you see, and through service. The service is sometimes we think that we have to do it, but only God serves. We don't serve. We think we serve. If we let God do his thing, he does it through us. As Baba would say, just love me. I'll do all the rest. Because he can use that love that we have in ways that we can formulate or we cannot formulate. But you know how, you know, in the olden times, but not even now, people say a blessing before meals. In Islamic tradition, they say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Well, among the advanced Sufis, that was considered an act of alchemy.
Oh,
Because it raised, when you eat something, you make it a human. That is one alchemy, that you're changing a carrot into a human. But also when you say that, you know, you invoke God, you raise it even to the highest possible way. So that's why we say Jai Baba before we eat, or some of us, when we remember, we say Jai Baba before we eat. I know I don't always remember, but if I can remember, I try to, you know, say Jai Baba, because then it'll help whatever it is that I'm eating, that kingdom, that, you know, collective, in ways that align with what Baba wants. So you see, slowly and slowly, everything becomes Baba focused, and we see the relationship. And we could not hold some of these ideas 50, 60 years ago when Baba was, you know, giving his messages. Even God speaks, many of us have difficulty with. But now he is kind of sending these more details down for us to be aware of and to inform our lives and our activities. I hope that helped.
oh yes. Thank you so much.
Jai Baba, now I don't know if there's going to be time for my thought and sort of question. So it really has to do with, first of all, something that Joseph Params, who was closely associated with MEHER and Sufi, something he told me about the formation of the United States and Baba's work to do with it. But it also has to do with what you just, Farhad, you deal with these complicated subjects and you actually start making them understandable. And it's so amazing. I'm still trying to absorb what you said. And there's one thing that you said that affects my thoughts about this country, you know, that the meeting of the diverse cultures, I think you said, will be a blending of the cultures. And what I understand Baba to say, and it just happened, I had the quote right here, that Baba says, the New World culture will not deny the value of diverse traditions, nor merely accord them patronizing tolerance. On the contrary, it will entail active appreciation of the diverse religions and cultures. And that came to mind, of course, because that's the foundation of this country. So Joseph said that when this country was being founded, he and a number of those very close to Meher Baba were in the other world. So some of the Mandali, I guess, and Baba, and that they were in direct communication with the founders of the United States of America, like Washington and all the others, because it was very important that the founders be able to get this country on a solid foundation for Meher, and I think we can see that importance now as we all are coming together. And Joseph was from Lebanon, and he was a Druze. So, he was Middle Eastern, and anyway, so that's my Joseph story.
Thank you. Yes, right on. I think we've talked about this very early on. Maybe you weren't in those early sessions, Jill, but we talked about how the United States, the geologists called it from a plate tectonic perspective, they call it the United Plates of America, because it had plates, tectonic plates from all parts of the world that have come together. And as we said, each piece of land has a particular characteristic, that it grows certain kind of plants, certain kind of consciousness, certain kind of values, and so forth. And so the United States of America actually includes geologically characteristics to allow a blending of variety of different cultures and different ideologies and different plants and everything. So from that perspective, it is true. And the idea of, there is no unity without diversity. If you think about it, diversity only makes sense unity makes sense only in contrast to diversity. When you bring diverse things together, then you have unity. If you don't have any diversity, you can't have any unity. And so, we all think that we all need to think about, we have been conditioned to think uniformity, that we all have to think and believe the same things. I remember the other day, we were at a table at lunch, and a companion was disagreeing with me on something. And I said, oh, how wonderful. We are supposed to have different perspectives about things, because without different perspectives, we can't arrive at unity. So then we go beyond that superficial level to find where the unity is.
My question is about something else you brought up. You talk the blending of the God state and the man state in our lives. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about that very same point yesterday and today. Like, what would it be if we wanted, desired strongly to live God's life on earth? What would it be, that blending of the God state and the man state?
Yeah, well,
in practical terms.
Yeah, my understanding is, and of course very limited, is that the minute you start to want something very forcefully, you're reawakening your winding tendencies, and that becomes lust. So the way to do it is and that's what yogis do and all that. So I know that's not what you're talking about, but I just wanted to kind of mention that. But it is something that awakens naturally within a person. It's not something that one can force or one can do something about, again, in the past, we've done that, all of us, to, you know, and that's why you're here now. So we don't do anything. We just love God and we just live a life of love, knowing that everything is God. We don't see it, or I don't see it, or I don't experience everything as being God, but the back of our mind, Baba has instilled this truth in us that everything, everyone is God. And so if I'm backbiting, I'm dishonoring Baba in that man or woman. And not that I don't do that. I'm not saying that I'm there yet, but just knowing that puts a curb, puts something in front. And so living the life of God as man is as natural as that, for us at least, just to remember that everything is God, that everything, and then when it awakens, and then you don't have to, just go by hearsay. And even now with our limited consciousness, I know sometimes I'm walking and I look at the asphalt and I pay some attention to the asphalt and I greet it or, say hello. And then it returns that love back to me tenfold. There's this exchange that begins to happen, or a tree or grass or flowers. And again, I know for me, it's not something that happens continuously, but when it does, it is such a sweet exchange of love so you don't have to have a more beautiful woman or a beautiful man to love. The door to your house, you can, greet it with love or anything. Anyhow, at least that's my understanding, that's how you live God's life on earth. Yesterday, I think I came across this lovely video of Robert Dreyfus. Some of you may know him. He was one of the few young people who was able to see Baba when Baba was in exclusion period of his life, 1967 or something. And one of the things that he said was that there was a point where Baba said, "Is there anything you want to know?" And I said, "No, Baba." And then he said, "Well, is there anything that you want?" And I said, "Yes, Baba." And he said things, I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect that I want to be able to love everybody and to, see you in everybody and all of that. And Baba said, "I will help you." He didn't say, "Good luck." He said, "I'll help you, but try to give me everything, good and bad, whatever you do, whatever is in your life, give it to me." And this is a message that he has given in so many different ways, because when you begin to unwind, all you can do is to surrender, is to offer, is to not hold back anything. You have held back everything in the creation as we were winding. And so now it's the time to give it back. And so that's why it says, leave everything at my feet, good and bad. And so, just as you said, we need to do whatever pleases him. And this is one of the things that he said he would like us to do.